Late at night, in the kitchen of a restaurant called Catherine's Kiss in Brooklyn, New York, a young Chinese man in his early 20s was wearing a white apron and was busy scrubbing the mountains of plates. His expression was serious and attentive, as if washing dishes was a noble and great job, and even though the fair-skinned, sexy-dressed white lady boss was watching him from a distance, he didn't respond. On the contrary, it is more trembling work. I have to say that this picture is really weird, so weird that the other male employees in the kitchen all showed expressions of envy, jealousy, and hatred. Especially the black man who was also washing the dishes immediately whispered, "Hey, man, you are blessed. You must know that I have worked in this restaurant for more than half a year, but I have never seen our charming boss, who is the man. So concerned. Maybe you can be a little more proactive and ask her to have a meal after get off work or something." "Shut up. Work." The Chinese young man responded coldly, and continued to lower his head and quickly scrub the next plate. However, as long as you pay attention, you will find that there is a deep fear in his eyes, as if the beautiful and glamorous woman on the opposite side is some kind of terrifying beast. Okay, keep your seriousness and coldness, maybe Catherine just saw that." The black man shrugged indifferently while muttering. After being together for almost a month, he has long been accustomed to the other party's ignoring attitude towards everyone. Just like that, after a few more minutes, the beautiful lady boss finally turned around and left the kitchen, disappearing at the end of the stairs at the corner. Seeing this scene, the Chinese young man breathed a sigh of relief instantly, and the tense expression on his face also relaxed. Maybe other employees in the kitchen don't know who this Catherine is, but he has seen with his own eyes that his boss used a powerful mind to throw a werewolf covered in thick hair into the sky and fell to his death. Any nonsense. In fact, he is not a person from this world, but from another ordinary person with a similarity of more than 90%, also known as the Earth. The reason why I was thrown over was just because I got drunk in a bar and complained to a stranger I didn't know, complaining that the real world was too monotonous, work was too boring, and the relationship between people too indifferent. If only I could live in a world full of fantasy. As for the stranger's appearance, due to his drunkenness, he can't remember at all. But who would have thought that a very normal complaint would lead to a terrible tragedy? When he woke up, he was surprised to find himself lying naked in a dirty alley, with a palm-sized scroll of parchment next to him, with the words, "My dear friend, this is what you want. Fantasy world, please start enjoying it." At first, he only thought that it was a bad joke and prank played by a friend, so he picked up the scroll and walked out of the alley, intending to see who was fixing himself. However, it was in response to that sentence, "I didn't know if I didn't see it, I was startled when I saw it." Whether it's the pedestrians passing by or the shops that do business, they are basically white, black and Latino, and the number of Asians is pitifully small. If it is a whole person, it is too big. Immediately after, he obtained a set of old clothes from a kind old man, and under the guidance of the other party, he set out for the downtown location. A few hours later, he saw the famous signs such as the Statue of Liberty, the Empire State Building, and the Golden Gate Bridge. Sexual buildings. At this moment, no matter how stupid he is, he knows that this is the largest and most prosperous city in the entire America, New York. Even the time went back to 2003. Shock. Confused. Incredible. With a complicated mood that cannot be described in words, he began to try to contact his family and friends across the ocean, trying to figure out what happened. But unfortunately, there seems to be no trace of his existence in this world at all. After numerous repeated confirmations, he finally realized that what was written on the parchment scroll was not a joke, but true. The only thing that is unclear is what is meant by fantasy here. Until more than 20 days ago, he meets his current boss, Catherine Agnes, a witch with terrifying supernatural powers. "Zhang Cheng, here's your salary for this week. Be careful when you go back later, the streets are a little rough recently." An old Mexican-American man who looked to be in his 50s suddenly walked in and threw an envelope containing banknotes on the table. His name is Carls. On the surface, he is the manager of this restaurant, but behind the scenes, he is Catherine Agnes' servant, assistant, and housekeeper. He also holds some incredible power. Thank you very much, sir. The Chinese youth hurriedly turned around and thanked him. He didn't even look at how much money was inside, and just stuffed it into his pocket. As a person without a birth certificate, driver's license, green card, and work visa, he can't enjoy any insurance and social benefits at all. He can only work undercover in secret and live carefully on the meager cash income every week. Occasionally, I have to avoid the police and immigration raids, as well as the harassment of small gangsters. But today is the 30th day that he came to this world, a very special day. As long as it is past midnight, the first task given on the mysterious parchment scroll will successfully survive for 30 days. It will be completed successfully. At that time, he will randomly select a profession as a template from the many fantasy games he has played, as well as the novels and film and television works he has read, and enter the world where the profession is located to obtain his own strength. You must know that since he was chased for 3 streets by a werewolf full of fangs, and almost died after being caught and torn to pieces by the other party, he realized that although this earth looks ordinary on the outside, among many ordinary people, there are many hidden vampires, werewolves, shapeshifters, ghouls, ghosts, devils, angels, wizards, witchers, witch doctors, shaman priests, etc., many supernatural creatures and people with special abilities that exist only in myths and folklore. If he doesn't want to die one day, he must have the ability to at least protect himself. As for who threw him into this world and what purpose, he didn't plan to think too much for the time being. After all, since the other party can throw a person from one time and space to another, or a parallel universe, the power must be beyond imagination, and it may even be a prank by a in the multiverse who has nothing to do. What's more, even if he finds the culprit behind the scenes, he can't force the other party to send him back, so he honestly improves his strength and establishes a firm foothold in this world first. Filled with an urgent desire for mysterious power, Zhang Cheng quickly finished washing the mountains of dishes in the sink, took off his work clothes and put on cheap casual clothes he bought from a second-hand goods store, and strode toward his residence. You must know that Brooklyn, New York is not a safe place, especially for the sake of cheap rent. He chose a relatively chaotic neighborhood. He could hear gunshots and shrill screams almost every night, plus some mysterious power. The existence of a few people is simply commonplace. Perhaps it is precisely because of this that the scroll gave the task of successfully surviving for 30 days. In the narrow and dark alley, a street lamp that was about to burn out flickered on and off, as if it might go out at any time, as if it was alluding to the people in this chaotic neighborhood. Although life is so difficult and dangerous, there is always a small some people do not choose to be depraved, and there is always a trace of hope in their hearts. However, as the age increases, this weak fire of hope will eventually die out. Young people who once fantasized about getting rid of poverty and embarking on the road to success will eventually become criminals, or special people who are not ashamed of the society. Profession. However, none of this has anything to do with Zhang Cheng. He just wants to return to his fairly safe residence as soon as possible, and honestly pass the deadline set by the mission. As for the lives of others, he didn't want to care at all, and he didn't want to run into any more vampires, werewolves, and other things. But unfortunately, according to Murphy's Law, the more a person is often worried about something, the more it will happen. Just as he was about to cross the street and walk into a dilapidated 4-story apartment building not far away, he suddenly heard a piercing scream from a street away. Ah! Followed by a ragged young girl with dark red blood flowing from her shoulders, she rushed out and shouted in horror, "Strange, monsters! There are monsters! Help me!" Before Zhang Cheng could react to what happened, the 2 tall shadows behind him caught up at a very fast speed, throwing the girl directly to the ground, and tearing her apart in 3 or 2 seconds. Clothes, biting on the slender neck. Poof! The dazzling bright red liquid splashed in all directions. The girl took her last breath before she could even scream. Judging from her clothes, she should be a student from a nearby high school. She didn't go home after school, but she didn't know where to go. The books and stationery in her school bag were scattered on the ground in a mess. The light quickly dimmed, leaving this world with endless fear and unwillingness. And those 2 tall shadows didn't hesitate, laying on the corpse, biting and swallowing, just like hungry beasts. Seeing this scene, Jiang Cheng twitched in his heart, and immediately went to touch the pistol hidden in his pocket. Because the dark shadow that devoured the corpse frantically was the werewolf who chased him all over the street not long ago. These guys have thick black or brown hair all over their bodies and are over 2 meters tall. Their strong muscles can easily overturn an ordinary family car. Their sharp claws and teeth are covered with blood plasma and minced meat. The eyes glowed a terrifying red. Since it happened to be the night of the full moon tonight, they had no sense at all, and their minds were full of hunting and killing thoughts. According to the witch, Catherine, a werewolf is a paradox of half human and half beast. When it does not transform, it is no different from ordinary people. Once it is transformed by the full moon, it will instantly transform into a monster driven by animal nature. Some special means, otherwise it is impossible to prevent them from hurting others. Especially the werewolves living in New York, most of them will lock themselves in the warehouse or the basement on the night of the full moon, and then come out again after recovering their sanity. However, there are always exceptions, and a small number of werewolves always feel that returning to the wild instinct is a complete werewolf. So they don't lock themselves up at all, but choose to wander around and kill on full moon nights. With nearly terrifying muscle strength and super-fast wound healing speed, small-caliber firearms and knives are of no use to werewolves. Only the silver boiled with the secret medicine can really stop the wound from healing and kill the transformed werewolf. Of course, if there are fierce people who can directly chop off their heads, they can also kill werewolves. As an ordinary young man who couldn't be more ordinary, Jiang Cheng obviously did not have the ability to fight with each other. The 9mm pistol he bought from the black market for less than $150 was undoubtedly not enough to deal with the current crisis. Therefore, he didn't have any hesitation. Taking advantage of the fact that the werewolf was frantically eating the corpse, he turned around and ran towards the restaurant where he was working, trying to ask for help from his beautiful young lady boss or her servant Kars. As for calling the police or something, he didn't even dare to think about it, not to mention the trouble of the identity of the black household. The weapons carried by ordinary patrol officers simply cannot cope with the current situation. Ow! Only a loud howl was heard, and the extraordinarily tall werewolf suddenly turned around. Without asking, he knew that it must have found a new prey, and immediately called for another werewolf, leaving the female corpse behind. One right flanks from both sides. Damn! Jiang Cheng cursed through gritted teeth, quickly took out his 9mm pistol, and pulled the trigger without thinking. Boom! 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 Accompanied by a flash of fire, 3 bullets hit the werewolf rushing in front on the spot. The huge impact made it stop for a while, and blood splattered in all directions. Like this directly hit by a firearm at close range, if it is an ordinary person, reading www.uuganchu.com is afraid that he has already fallen to the ground. But for the werewolf, this is just a skin injury. In less than 2 or 3 seconds, the muscles began to squeeze the warhead in the body, and finally the warhead was squeezed out. Although the fur on the body was still stained with a lot of blood, the wound had completely healed, as if it had never been hurt. At this moment, Jiang Cheng had the urge to curse, raised his gun again at another werewolf who was chasing after him, and fired several more shots until the gun chamber made an empty sound, and then he turned around and ran frantically. While running, he did not forget to take out the weird parchment in his pocket and check the countdown given above. He knew very well that with his physical strength and speed, it was impossible to escape the pursuit of the two werewolves, so his only hope was to complete the task of surviving for 30 days and obtain a job template before being caught up. Fortunately, this time, the parchment paper did not disappoint him, and went straight to the last-minute countdown. In other words, in 60 seconds, midnight will come. 1 minute. I just need to hold on for another minute. Zhang Cheng endured the fear and shouted wildly in his heart. The intense exercise and nervousness caused his heart to be seriously overloaded. He opened his mouth and desperately took in the air, and the expression on his face was extremely distorted. But even so, the two werewolves who followed them quickly caught up. Seeing that the sharp claws and the teeth were close at hand, the parchment suddenly released a golden light, engulfing him completely. The werewolf, who was mad because of the injury, jumped up and jumped straight into the air. Confusion flashed in his murderous eyes, and he kept sniffing with his sensitive nose. Whirring. With a violent gasp, Zhang Cheng was surprised to find that he didn't know when he came to the gate of a high tower built in the middle of the void. Except for the location of the tower, all around were chaotic and flashing colorful. Galaxy of colors. In front of the unbelievable scenery, he shivered subconsciously, and carefully put one foot out of the platform, but as expected, he stepped completely empty. This also means that if you accidentally fall, you basically don't expect to be alive. After realizing how dangerous his place was, he stood there and rested for a few minutes until his breathing calmed down, and then he took out the parchment and checked the tips given above. Successfully survive for 30 days, the mission is complete. A reward for any fantasy world job template. Please stand on the circular sign in front of the tower gate. Circle mark. Zhang Cheng subconsciously raised his head and glanced at the entrance, and soon saw a golden disc with a diameter of about 2 meters, densely engraved with countless exquisite patterns, and inlaid with hundreds of gems. The most important thing is that this disc is not on the ground, but suspended in midair, constantly refracting colorful light around it. Out of the desire and yearning for supernatural power, he didn't think too much, and quickly came to the front of the disc. At the same time, the disc also seemed to have wisdom, slowly descending from the top of his head and letting him step on it. At the moment when both feet are stepped on, countless gems suddenly release colorful illusions, showing one by one fantasy worlds that only exist in games, books, and film and television works. Games such as Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter Nights, and Icewind Dale, as well as the background world in which many novels and tabletop games take place, the Forgotten Realm. Azeroth, where Warcraft and World of Warcraft are located. The place known as the originator of fantasy, The Lord of the Rings, Middle-earth. The hit American drama A Song of Ice and Fire depicts a world of conspiracy and power struggles. Nin, the planet where the Elder Scrolls series is located. The world of Sanctuary in Diablo and more. In addition to this, there are things like Harry Potter, which also take place in the world of Super-Earth. In short, all the above worlds originated from the deepest memory in Zhang Cheng's mind. As a standard fantasy fan, he has read too many fantasy novels and film and television works, and played too many games with the same theme, so he is no stranger to this. But what puzzled him was that these worlds were supposed to be illusory worlds created out of thin air by the authors and game club reporters with the help of their imaginations. But now, these illusory worlds are actually going to become reality, and he has to enter them, which is far beyond his comprehension. Just when Zhang Cheng was shocked and stared at the pictures of the real and incredible world around him, a line of small words suddenly appeared on the sheepskin: "World extraction begins." Moment. The illusion began to spin rapidly around the disc, and after about a minute, it began to slow down. In the end, the illusion of the world of Azeroth stayed straight ahead. The next second, he only felt a dazzling white light flashed, and he lost his perception of the surroundings. When his vision began to recover, he was no longer in a mysterious tower, nor was the seemingly normal, but in fact extremely dangerous magical earth. It is a rolling hilly area. Emerald green trees and flowers, fresh air, crisp bird calls, everything seems so relaxed and comfortable. On the tree not far away, two lovely squirrels are busy picking nuts and storing them in order to cope with the coming cold winter, and they don't care about the sudden appearance of humans. Where is this place? Jiang Cheng was blown away by the slightly cool breeze, and he shuddered violently, and hurriedly flipped through the contents on the parchment. I saw that it was written in delicate small print, "Welcome to the beautiful Azeroth. According to your race human, you automatically join the Alliance camp, and you can play in the following 6 occupations at the same time: warrior, warlock, thief, priest, mage. Choose one of the paladins, and the next tasks will be issued according to the chosen profession." 6 occupations? No hunters, no death knights, this should be the setting of the 1960s, right? Jiang Cheng whispered while trying to rummage through the somewhat vague memories in his mind. After all, it's a game from more than 10 years ago, plus countless version revisions, and new races, occupations, and levels that will be opened later, so few people can remember them all clearly. He didn't dare to be sloppy when it came to choosing the first career template. He simply sat down on the soft grass, ready to think carefully. First of all, the warriors who were known as the beginning of hell difficulty in the 1960s were directly excluded from the selection. Because this profession is too easy to die, the famous phrase "heaven to the left, warrior to the right" best describes the tragic situation of the warrior profession in the 1960s. Perhaps in the game, the player runs the corpse a few times at most and loses some equipment repair costs, but in the real world, the loss is their own life, but no one with a normal mind would like to be a warrior who charges ahead. Secondly, occupations such as paladins, priests, and warlocks that obviously have certain special tendencies must also be extra cautious. Otherwise, they will be involved in danger and trouble. As a result, there are only 2 professions left to choose from, one is a mage and the other is a thief. The former has powerful control and damage burst capabilities, while the latter has excellent stealth and assassination skills, which can be said to have their own advantages. But out of a fantasy fan's curiosity and yearning for magical power, Jiang Cheng didn't hesitate, immediately abandoned the thieves who accompanied the shadow, and whispered to the mysterious parchment, "Mage. I choose to become mage." "As you wish." A line of small words quickly flashed across the paper, followed by countless knowledge and memories related to magic, and all of them poured into the head like a tidal wave, causing severe tingling in the sensitive cranial nerves. Ah! He couldn't bear the pain at all, and immediately let out a heart-piercing scream, as if 10,000 needles were pierced into his head at the same time, and his 2 eyes were squeezed by an unknown force, resulting in severe protrusion and congestion, and the corners of his eyes. There was even bright red blood flowing around, looking very scary. Fortunately, the pain didn't last too long. In less than 30 seconds, the body's protective mechanism was activated, and the whole person rolled his eyes and fainted. Not long after falling into a coma, a cloud of lavender energy slowly emerged from the forehead and began to creep slowly along the skin, forming beautiful bright patterns wherever it passed, and finally when the surface of the skin was covered with this pattern after that, a prism-shaped mark was formed on Jiang Cheng's forehead, and it disappeared without a trace in about 3 or 5 seconds. If a mage from the continent of Azeroth sees it at this moment, he will definitely be very surprised. A young man can actually complete the transformation from an ordinary person to a mage apprentice without knowing it. Looking at the big cat that was close at hand, Jiang Cheng was frightened out of a cold sweat. Before the freezing effect disappeared, he quickly gathered his magic power and turned it into a harmless sheep. What? The mountain lion obviously couldn't understand why his body suddenly became smaller, and all his sharp claws and teeth disappeared, and there was a hint of confusion in his eyes. However, Jiang Cheng didn't intend to give it any time to think. He raised his leg and kicked it off the second-floor platform. The mountain lion that was attacked was in midair and immediately returned to its original appearance. With the excellent balance of the cat, it turned over effortlessly and landed firmly on the ground. The moment it just landed, an ice arrow emitting a biting chill fell from the sky, immediately shredding its cocky fur, and froze the blood vessels and muscles near the wound, forming a large area of terrifying frostbite with red and purple. Although there is no bleeding, frostbite is actually much more serious than bleeding. Looking at the painful expression on the mountain lion's face and slow movements, you can see how uncomfortable it is now, opening its mouth full of fangs and roaring angrily. Roar! But Zhang Cheng, who was standing on the balcony on the second floor, didn't care about the fury of the beast in front of him. He concentrated on channeling the magic energy. In the blink of an eye, his hands burst into orange fire. The next second, boom! I saw a flaming fireball flying through the air at an extremely fast speed, hitting the mountain lion's stomach severely, followed by a violent explosion. The hot flames scorched the thick fur of the mountain lion almost in an instant, and the explosion also tore open the soft muscles of the abdomen, revealing the internal organs inside. Under the ruthless attack of ice and fire, the king of the mountain forest suddenly fell into a desperate situation, and he didn't even have a chance to resist or escape. Zhang Cheng, who had no mercy, followed with another frostbolt and a fireball. After confirming that the mountain lion could no longer make any movements, he stopped and turned to open the door and walked into the wooden house. As the first time to use spells to fight, he did not feel unfamiliar and unskilled as expected, as if he was born with talent, and he didn't need to think too much. Will react accordingly. Perhaps, this is one of the benefits of castrating and simplifying the job template. He doesn't have to spend years, or even decades, studying and learning profound theoretical knowledge like a real Azeroth mage before he can gain a certain combat effectiveness. With all kinds of uncertain guesses, Zhang Cheng came to the room covered with thick dust and found the body on the bed at first sight. Due to the long period of time, the body has already lost all the water, leaving only the shriveled skin sacs, but somehow, miraculously, it did not rot. On the table next to the corpse, there was a piece of paper filled with the letters of the Union's common language, and it was estimated that 80% of it was a suicide note or something. In addition to this, there are only books and notes densely placed on the bookshelf, as well as the wardrobe and wooden box at the end of the bed. I have to say that such a humble place really does not look like the residence of a noble mage. After all, the real Azeroth is completely different from the game, especially a profession like a mage that requires a lot of time to learn and accumulate. It is impossible to appear in hundreds or thousands. Taking Dalaran under reconstruction as an example, the current number of civilians is about 3,000, and only 120 of them are mages affiliated to the Kirin Tor Council, although this is far from the full power of the Kirin Tor Council. But it is not difficult to distinguish the scarcity of the number of mages. What a poor fellow, may your soul rest in peace. While staring at the mummified corpse and muttering to himself, Zhang Cheng picked up the scribbled paper, wanting to see what the other party couldn't put down before it was temporary, and he had to leave a suicide note. In the end, after reading it for a few minutes, he was a little bit dumbfounded, and the first half of the suicide note was almost filled with hatred and scolding against Arthas. As the so-called love is all, hate is deep, Jason always believed that Arthas could lead Lord Aaron to unprecedented prosperity and power, but he didn't expect that the prince had fallen into a terrible place before he could inherit the throne. The Death Knight also personally killed his biological father, slaughtered the people he swore to protect, and completely destroyed the once glorious kingdom. The sharp contrast between before and after made him unacceptable in his heart and physiology, so he chose to turn all his feelings into hatred. As for the second half, he was talking about his unknown admiration and secret love for Jaina. Like many men in Dalaran, Risen was once fascinated by Jaina Proudmoore's beautiful appearance and her incredible talent for magic. It's just that among the many suitors, he was too insignificant, so insignificant that no one was aware of the emotion hidden deep in his heart, and he finally showed it in the last 10 minutes before he died. From between the lines of the suicide note and some memories left in his mind, Zhang Cheng quickly realized that in fact, This mage named Risen is a typical person with high IQ, low EQ, and a little low self-esteem. His nerves are both sensitive and fragile, so Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com was hit and collapsed, completely losing hope in life. After reading this, he didn't know if it was a catharsis or some kind of suicide note that revealed his true feelings. Zhang Cheng sighed slightly, and came to the bookshelf and began to read through the heavy and thick notes. After a while, he was firmly fascinated by all kinds of magical knowledge, and unconsciously he forgot the passage of time. When he was hungry, he made a piece of magic bread to satisfy his hunger. When he was thirsty, he made some magic water. When he was sleepy, he lay down not far. Take a nap on the chair. For the next half-month, he was completely immersed in the ocean of magical knowledge, and through the legacy left by Risen, he finally had a clear understanding of the mage profession. In Azeroth, mage does not just refer to the mage profession that players can choose in the game, but refers to more than a dozen different branches including Shadow, Necromancer, Arcane, Fire, Frost, etc. Because in a strict sense, whether it is the original warlock in the human world or the undead magic of the cursed gods, it is actually the result of some powerful mages studying the magic of the Orc Shadow Council. Although the initial purpose was to defeat the enemy faster, as the research progressed, they were gradually seduced by powerful forces, and eventually degenerated into the Burning Legion, or the minions of the undead natural disaster. This also means that Zhang Cheng, who has arcane energy flowing in his body, can also acquire abilities other than the professional template through learning. Because Risen had personally experienced the destruction of Dalaran, he took a lot of rare and precious materials and books with him when he escaped. Now all this knowledge has become the nourishment for Zhang Cheng's growth. He eagerly absorbed the wisdom of countless outstanding mages, built his own magic theory system from scratch, and even forgot the passage of time. Just when Zhang Cheng devoted himself to learning magic theory knowledge, a caravan from Hainan town was approaching the direction of the hut in the woods. The size of the team is not large, there are only 5 carriages, 5 coachmen and coolies, 2 guards in leather armor and holding long swords and shields, and finally there is a 13 or 14-year-old with long golden hair. Cute girl. Although hiring guards requires high commissions, in order to ensure that his goods will not be attacked by undead, beasts, and syndicated criminal organizations, the caravan owner, Old George, reluctantly gave up and hired 2 local warriors with good strength. Of course, there are 2 main reasons for this. One is that some of the goods on the car are quite special. As long as they can be safely transported to their destination, they will not only get rich rewards, but also establish close relationships with the mages in the Kirin Tor Council. He didn't want the opportunity that he had worked so hard to win to end up in vain. The second is to send the beloved little daughter to settle in Dalaran, which is being rebuilt. If possible, it is best to be an apprentice under a certain mage. Of course, it would be even better if you could marry a noble mage. You must know that after the group of self-proclaimed forsaken undead occupied the ruins of Lord Aaron, the residents from Alterac Valley to Hillsbrad Hills were subjected to terrible attacks all the time. Just last month, at least 6 poor farmers on the farm were killed by the sudden attack of the undead. Only Dalaran under the protection of the magical shield has no record of civilian casualties. Those undead can't even get close, let alone rush in to kill. Old George is a businessman and a very realistic person. In his opinion, the meager force of Nanhai town alone is not enough to protect his life and property, so he naturally finds a way out. In fact, 3 months ago, he had sent his eldest son to take care of a shop in Stormwind City further south, while his second daughter followed her husband to Manethil Harbor in the wetlands to run a leather business. Although the children are separated from each other, it can be quite troublesome to meet each other, but it is still much better than the whole family getting together and being killed. Don't think this is a joke. For ordinary people who have just experienced the natural disaster of the undead and the invasion of the Burning Legion, they can best understand the fragility of life, so there is nothing more important than protecting the safety of themselves and their families. Hello. Dear Mr. Employer. It's going to be dark in 2 hours, where are we going to spend the night tonight? Don't tell me you're going to camp in the wild. A male guard who looked to be in his early 30s stopped abruptly. Footsteps, turned around and asked loudly. Old George touched the back of his head with slightly sparse hair, and responded in a slightly tired voice, "Don't worry, I'm not stupid enough to expose the caravan to the sight of those undead in this dangerous season. As long as we walk a little further, we can see a small wooden house with a reclusive mage living in it, and we can stay overnight." Reclusive mage? I've been in Nanhai town for half a year, how come I've never heard of it? Another slightly younger guard showed doubts in his eyes. Ha 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 ha. What's so strange about this? Your Excellency doesn't seem to like interacting with people, so he rarely goes out on weekdays, but all the businessmen and travelers who often pass by this place know about the wood hut. We just need giving a trivial gift, to be exact, daily supplies, can be exchanged for his protection. Old George explained with a big smile. So that's it. The young guard nodded thoughtfully, and then communicated with his companions with very obscure eyes. The latter made a calm gesture and continued to silently follow behind the team. Before everyone was paying attention, he threw a round metal badge on the ground. About 10 minutes later, when the caravan was far away, a petite, masked woman suddenly emerged from the grass. Without saying a word, she immediately picked up the badge and checked it carefully, and soon found the small characters engraved on the back, and muttered to herself, "The reclusive mage? Did he escape from Dalaran when disaster struck? Or the Kirin Tor? The council noticed our activities? No. Report this matter to the Duke as soon as possible." Before Hua could finish speaking, another masked man came out, grabbed the badge, and asked with a sneer, "What? Are you scared? Damn it! Give me the badge. In addition, the action tonight must be stopped. You don't even know who the enemy we are about to face." The masked woman scolded sharply. "Humph! Timid means cowardly. I knew that a woman like you is not suitable for being in an organization at all. Perhaps pleasing men is what you are best at, isn't it?" After speaking, the man suddenly pulled out a dagger. With lightning speed, he lifted the woman's mask. Moment. A beautiful face with a hint of danger, exposed to the setting sun. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Short black hair, emerald green eyes, small nose and attractive red lips, coupled with bumpy tight-fitting leather armor, like a rose with thorns, reminding the guy who wants to be prepared to be injured at any time, even prepared to die. "You wanna die?" The woman was obviously provoked. She drew out the short sword pinned to her waist, and pounced on it like a leopard. She has undoubtedly undergone quite professional fighting training. Every attack is close to the key point. If the opponent is not careful, she will die immediately. That's right. Ha 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 ha. That's right. That's it. Do you know what I like the most about you? Because you are more rebellious than ordinary women, I like women who can resist the most, because it can bring a lot of extra excitement with a sense of conquest. The man calmly waved his dagger, parrying, dodging, and flirting with words. His fighting skills are even more brilliant. Not only did he avoid all attacks exactly, but he also took advantage of the neutrality of the attack to counterattack. In just 2 or 3 minutes, he removed all the leather armor and clothes on the woman's body. The fair and attractive skin was exposed, especially the chest, which was almost completely released. Bastard! Remember me! The woman knew that if she continued, she would definitely suffer, so she threw the dagger in her hand, turned around and slid into the grass, and disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. The man didn't have any intention of chasing him, he just raised the dagger and put it on his nose and sniffed, and said to himself with a look of enjoyment, "What an intoxicating fragrance! Dear Sophia, whether it's you or the whole regardless of the organization, sooner or later, it belongs to me." The great Alterac nobles will regain their former status and glory under my leadership, and I will get rid of whoever dares to lead the way. Interesting, is this arcane energy? Looking at the bottle with a mysterious violet halo in it, a faint smile appeared on Zhang Cheng's face. Although at this moment, he has not closed his eyes for more than 40 consecutive hours, but his spirit is extremely excited. Because with the knowledge he has gathered from books, he can finally extract pure arcane energy without the help of simplified career templates. To put it in a simple and easy-to-understand way, it is to visualize the mana in the game and form a mysterious substance that is not known as gas or liquid. Don't think it's okay, for an Azrathian mage, being able to draw pure arcane energy means making magic items. Taking the enchanted robes worn by many caster professions as an example, the looming arcane rune threads above are the result of special treatment of arcane energy and superior silk threads. In addition, there are arcane runes, various spell dusts, magic light fragments, inextinguishable essences, etc., all derived from these brilliantly colored primitive arcane energies. It can be said that if a mage masters the skills of extracting primitive arcane energy, then he will no longer have to worry about money in his life. He only needs to extract some arcane energy to sell to merchants every once in a while, and it is easy to get rich returns. Of course, due to the limitation of his own strength, the purity of the arcane energy extracted by Zhang Cheng is not very high, and can only be used to make some primary magic materials. Just when he wanted to build a magic wand for himself to practice his hand according to the method recorded in the book, he suddenly heard a cluttered sound from outside the house, followed by a man shouting loudly in common language. "Your Excellency the Mage, I'm Old George, are you at home?" Old George. Zhang Cheng frowned subconsciously, looked out through the gap in the window, and found several carriages parked in the open space only a few dozen meters away from the wooden house. The lead was a somewhat bald old man who was carrying several heavy sacks and looked at the second floor earnestly, as if waiting for a positive answer. The other party obviously didn't know that the mage who originally lived here had been dead for a long time, and only one corpse was still lying on the bed. Just when he was very hesitant to go out, meet these Azeroth natives, and get some information from the outside world, a few lines of small words suddenly appeared on the parchment that had not seen any movement for many days. Task 1. The Trial of the Apprentice, arrived in the magical kingdom of Dalaran within 10 days, and was approved by the Kirin Tor Council. Successful completion of the reward will open the talent tree, failure will permanently close the talent. Second, Eyes in the Dark, you have been targeted by a mysterious enemy. Successfully resolve this crisis and randomly reward one professional skill. Third, the ambition of the businessman, to help Old George fulfill his wish. Successful completion of the task will reward you with a flint staff, and there will be no punishment for failure. Hehe, what are you? A mission log. Zhang Cheng stared at the parchment and complained in disbelief. But unfortunately, the parchment doesn't seem to have the ability to think, so he didn't respond to his teasing. After showing the task, he quickly regained his calm. Well, since you want me to interact with the Aborigines in this world, then I will do as you wish. He muttered to himself in a low voice. He quickly took off his casual clothes, took out a set of robes and boots belonging to Risen from the closet and put them on, followed by pushing the door to the balcony on the second floor. Said, "Sorry, if you are looking for my teacher, I am afraid you will be disappointed. Not long ago, he left this world." Leave this world. A little girl with long blonde hair, her eyes showed fear from the bottom of her heart, and her whole body trembled involuntarily. Yes, he died, and he left a suicide note before he died. I was planning to go to Dalaran and report the news of his death to the Kirin Tor Council. With that, Zhang Cheng took out the ironic letter. The suicide note was shaken in front of everyone. After much consideration, he decided to integrate into the world as an apprentice of Risen. After all, 20 years from the Dark Portal, after Dalaran was devastated, Risen has lived a secluded life alone. For more than 4 years, it was enough for him to train a mage apprentice. Old George was stunned, looked at the young man standing in front of him, and after a while he asked, "Since the master is gone, can you allow us to stay here for one night? I am willing to pay you handsomely." Jiang Cheng calmly glanced at the members of the team, and Yu Qi paused for a moment on the two sword-wielding warriors, and finally nodded with a pretense, "Yes. I allow you to rest in front of the wooden house, but you can't come up. I like quiet people, so please reduce the noise as much as possible." "Of course. Thank you very much. Oh, by the way, I have some small gifts here, please accept them." Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Overjoyed, Old George quickly took 2 steps forward and raised the sack he was carrying. "Gift." Jiang Cheng bent down and opened the bag inexplicably, and found that it was full of bread, pies, cheese, ham, bacon, fresh fruits, vegetables, and other foods. Although it was not worth much money, it was quite attractive to him who had been eating magic bread for half a month in a row. You must know that the bread made by the food creation technique can barely fill the stomach, but the taste and texture are not flattering, it is basically similar to sawdust. Some souvenirs from Nanhai town, please don't dislike them. In fact, every time we pass by here, we will bring some to your excellency risen. Old George explained graciously. "That's it, I accept your kindness, thank you." Jiang Cheng politely thanked him, dragged the 2 sacks to the balcony on the 2nd floor, and walked into the house without looking back. He was hungry, but he didn't want outsiders to see his drooling appearance, and he also didn't want the image he finally built up to be destroyed. "Hey, it's going well, isn't it?" Old George turned around and smiled at the 2 guards, followed by a gesture, signaling the coachman to set up camp. Under his command, after a while, the warm bonfire was lit, and everyone sat in front of the bonfire, quietly discussing what had just happened. No one noticed at all that when the sun went down, a group of dark shadows silently surrounded the wooded hut from all directions. "Put on a black face towel and join in." For a moment, the shadow of evil shrouded the cabin, and maybe the next second, a terrible attack will happen. The bright moon was in the sky, and the slightly cold night wind gently blew through the camp, causing everyone to tighten their cloaks involuntarily and leaned in front of the warm bonfire. Take a sip of Nanhai town's specialty, a cheap, but very choking low-quality spirit. Although according to the regulations of the caravan, no one is allowed to drink alcoholic beverages during the trip, but in practice, they always turn a blind eye, but no one will care about this if they don't drink until they become unconscious. Regulation. After all, trading is not a safe profession in the first place, not to mention the bandits that you may encounter along the way, just the attack of various wild beasts is enough to cause a headache. As a group of people who don't know if there is tomorrow after today, they naturally need something to relax their minds, so alcohol and tobacco naturally become an inevitable choice. While drinking the hot soup, Old George rubbed his little daughter's hair and asked with a smile, "Jenny, how did it feel to spend the night in the wilderness for the first time? Did you feel scared?" "Well, a little." The girl called Jenny carefully glanced at the pitch-dark woods and clenched her neck subconsciously. Perhaps it was because she had experienced the undead natural disaster, or she had heard too many scary stories, so she was very timid, and when she was a little bit troubled, she would act tremblingly, as if there were terrifying monsters hidden in the dark. "Ha ha ha ha! My lovely little Jenny, don't be afraid. Have you seen the master mage in the room? As long as he is there, no matter whether it is a robber or a monster, he will not dare to approach it easily. The powerful power of magic it's not comparable to a mere sword." Old George laughed and comforted. But just when he was about to say something, he suddenly felt a chill in his neck, and saw a sharp blade glowing with cold light. People died on the spot. "Don't move. Don't make a sound. Otherwise I'll kill you," a low voice warned. "I didn't move. Don't touch my daughter. Do you know who the goods you are looting belong to?" Old George obviously had experienced a similar situation, and hurriedly raised his hand to show that he had no resistance, while trying to use words intimidate each other. Because he noticed that in just a few seconds, more than a dozen masked men left the dark shelter, took down all the drivers, and the 2 guards he hired disappeared. After calming down a little and thinking about it for a few seconds, I can think that the caravan has been targeted since the moment it left Nanhai town. The only thing he didn't understand was why these men in black had to wait until now to do it. Don't they fear the power of magic? I advise you to be less clever. Of course we know what this shipment is, and it's the mages in Dalaran who need them. But so what? You thought we'd be afraid of a bunch of people huddled in magic shields? A bereaved dog. The masked man sneered and sneered as he walked to one of the carriages and accurately found the delicate small wooden box hidden in the mezzanine. With little effort, he knocked on the lock with ease. The moment the lid was opened, the dazzling brilliance immediately stabbed everyone's eyes. Pieces of crystals the size of a baby's fist exude colorful magic, as if they can a person's soul into it. My God! Arcane! Arcane crystals! There are really arcane crystals. We've made a fortune. Another masked man clenched his fists excitedly. If there is any mineral that is the most valuable in the continent of Azeroth, then the non-arcana crystal is none other than arcane crystal. Compared with it, all gold, silver, and mithril mines are not in the flow. This lens, which is completely condensed from mysterious arcane energy, can not only be used to create powerful magic equipment, but also a necessity for mages to build arcane towers. There are only a few thorium veins with rich reserves. There is a very low chance of being associated, and its value cannot be measured in money at all. Obviously, Dalaran, which is being rebuilt, needs to consume a lot of arcane crystals, so anyone who can bring arcane crystals can take this opportunity to establish a friendly relationship with the Kirin Tor Council, so that they can get various arcane crystals in the future. Priority purchase of alchemical potions and magic items. No businessman would be foolish enough to doubt the ability and speed of mages to create wealth, and even in their eyes, mages can be directly equated with lovely gold and silver coins. Seeing that the most valuable goods were turned over, Old George's face immediately became ugly, struggling to stand up and protect his property. But before he could straighten his knees, he immediately felt a heavy blow to the back of his head, and he fell to the ground with a thud, and the dark red blood quickly dyed his hair and slid down his neck. Ah! Dad! What's wrong with you? Go away! Keep Dad away from me! Jenny saw that her father was injured and rushed over, trying hard to push the attacker away. But unfortunately, with her slender arms, she is obviously not a match for a sturdy adult man. I saw the masked man grab the girl's wrist effortlessly, and use the other hand to squeeze the little face that was mixed with fear and anger. Yuyuganshu www.yuyuganshu.com laughed unscrupulously, ha 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 ha. Look. And here's a little girl with a sign. Maybe when we're done with this ticket, we can have some fun together. No. Get your dirty hands off. Don't touch my daughter. Otherwise, or else. In a hurry, Old George didn't care about his bleeding head, so he rushed on desperately and snatched his daughter back from the opponent's hands. What if you don't? Old man. Be honest with me. Otherwise, I don't mind getting rid of you first. The masked man kicked him contemptuously. Old George lowered his head and did not make any resistance action. Because he understands that under the current situation, the best way to protect his daughter is not to argue, but to honestly try not to irritate the other party as much as possible, and then patiently wait for the mage in the wooden house to notice what is happening outside. Having seen with his own eyes the powerful flames, frost, and arcane magic released by the mages in battle, he firmly believes that the power of magic is far superior to swords, and a group of greedy robbers will soon die without a place to be buried. The masked man-headed undoubtedly understood that the mage was not easy to deal with. After controlling the situation, he immediately made a gesture, and with the help of the hooks and ropes, he climbed from the side to the second-floor platform with his 3 subordinates. Feet close to doors and windows. Just as one of them was trying to look in through the gap in the plank, a hot fireball suddenly shattered the plank and hit him in the face. Boom! After a deafening loud noise, the unlucky didn't even have time to let out a scream, and fell directly from the second-floor platform, turning into a charred corpse. Of course, this is not because the fireball technique is too powerful, but because he was too unlucky to be pierced by a wooden thorn from the explosion. "Good evening, everyone, I've been waiting for a while. If you don't show up, then I'm going to fall asleep." While yawning, Zhang Cheng slowly pushed open the door and walked out. If it weren't for the fact that there was a corpse lying on the ground that was still being pulled out, I'm afraid no one would believe this slightly lazy young man in front of him, the one who didn't even warn me just now. No, a terrible mage who directly kills. For a while, all the masked people were stunned in place, and the guy in the lead even forgot to give an order to his subordinates, whether to launch a siege or try to negotiate. After all, his original plan was to take the lead in launching a sneak attack before the target was aware of it. Whether it was an assassination or a live capture, the initiative had to be in his own hands. But now, not only has he lost the initiative, but he is also a little unsure of the other party's details. Just when he was stunned, a guy who was stimulated by the tragic death of his companion suddenly pulled out a dagger without warning and stabbed Zhang Cheng fiercely, trying to use the preemptive advantage to solve the dangerous enemy who was only one step away. You must know that although mages symbolize mystery, wisdom, and power in the eyes of ordinary people, in the eyes of many insiders, they are actually not as invincible as rumored. On the contrary, due to spending a lot of time in research and study, the mage's body is quite fragile, and often only a common iron dagger is needed to end the life of an archmage. However, the masked man obviously forgot, and the mages themselves are very aware of this, and have developed a lot of targeted protection magic. Before the sharp blade that glowed with cold light approached his skin, he immediately felt a piercing cold, followed by severe frostbite on the skin of his hand in just 1 second. Of course, this wasn't the worst thing was that he found that the dagger was blocked by a layer of something like solid ice, and there was no way to touch the soft skin. Idiot! How does frost armor feel like? Zhang Cheng sneered and sarcastically. Don't look at him being very relaxed on the surface, he doesn't seem to care about anything, but in fact he is very nervous. Before he left the room, he added frost armor and mana shield to ensure the safety of his own life. What he never expected was that the frost armor technique, which can only increase armor and reduce the opponent's attack speed and movement speed in the game, has such a strong effect that a thin layer of ice that is almost indistinguishable to the naked eye can be used. Directly resisting the piercing of the sharp weapon, the caster himself can't feel the slightest cold. Shock, fear, trembling, despair. The eyes of the masked man who launched the sneak attack instantly revealed unbelievably complicated emotions. The next second, boom! He was hit by a strong flame and flew into the air. His face that was wearing a mask turned black, and then he landed on the ground not far away like a tattered rag doll. Dead. Killing 2 guys of unknown origin in a row, Zhang Cheng's mental state became extremely excited, as if the hunting and killing instinct hidden in his genes was completely activated, and he kept sweeping the remaining 2 masked men on the balcony. Go, as if considering who would be better off to kill first. Since the parchment gave the task of eyes in the dark, he has been mentally prepared. Through repeated testing and practice with the grizzly bears, mountain lions, and moss-eating spiders that often haunted the log house a few days ago, he has basically mastered some of the mage's fighting skills, plus the alchemy potions and magic items left by Risen, even if he can't completely wipe out the incoming enemy, and also make the other party suffer heavy losses, and ensure their safe evacuation. It was this fearlessness that made him extremely aggressive, as if he was eager to release the fear accumulated deep in his heart through violence. There is no hesitation. To be precise, Zhang Cheng didn't even see these guys as human beings, but regarded them as NPCs in the game, or wild monsters that provide players with experience points. Stop. Mage. I think we can talk. The masked man at the head no doubt sensed this chilling coldness, and hurriedly shouted loudly, trying to use negotiation to ease the current unfavorable situation. After all, there were only 2 people left on the balcony on the 2nd floor. He didn't want to try to see if he could survive under the impact of a hugely destructive spell. But unfortunately, Zhang Cheng has never been the kind of guy who likes to listen to other people's advice. It can even be described as conceited, especially from the enemy's advice. He completely ignored the other party's words, and a dark blue magic light suddenly gathered in the palm of his right hand, followed by releasing it towards the hapless person closest to him. Woohoo! Accompanied by a harsh sound, a terrifying fragment of ice, driven by a high-speed rotating airflow, swept across a fan-shaped area within a radius of 4 or 5 meters, not only tearing the target's skin into a mess, but also seriously injuring his muscles and nerve. The whole person seems to be caught in slow motion. There is no doubt that this is the ice cone technique that is loved by many mage players in the game, which can not only slow down the movement speed but also cause large-scale cold damage. But in the real world, it is far more terrifying than in the game. At least the ice cone technique in the game will definitely not be as it is now. What's more terrifying is that because the crushed ice completely freezes the nerve conduction, the victim can't feel the pain, and he still struggles desperately, making the injury more and more serious, and even the tendons are twisted in several places. Before he could take a few steps, he rolled down from the balcony on the 2nd floor to the ground like a rag doll. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Zhang Cheng, who didn't see the other party as a human at all, blazed hot fire from his hands, and shot a deadly fireball at the masked man covered in blood. Boom! After the loud noise and heat wave passed, a charred corpse rose into the air and fell heavily in front of the 2 guys who were about to use the rope to sneak up. They were so frightened that they hurried to avoid it, for fear that some terrifying spell would fall from the sky next. Cruel, cold, merciless. The attitude shown by Zhang Cheng made the masked man at the head realize that the person standing in front of him was not an ordinary person, or a gentle academic mage in his imagination, but an extremely difficult battle mage. If you can't come up with countermeasures quickly, then your next turn may be yourself. He didn't think that the subordinates around the wooden house would risk death and rush up to start a siege. Feeling the smell of blood and scorching in the air, Zhang Cheng slowly turned around, stared at the only survivor on the 2nd floor balcony, and said with a sneer, "What did you just say? Do you want me to stop? I'm sorry. My ears are not very good, and sometimes I can't hear other people's words. I believe you won't mind, right?" "Of course. Of course I don't mind. It's all their fault. You shouldn't make hostile actions to cause unnecessary misunderstandings. For this, I express my most sincere apologies to you." Having said that, the masked man leader took off his mask, revealing a male face in his 30s, and bowed gracefully with one hand on his chest. Especially the Tuowei mustache, which is meticulously trimmed, and the skin is very delicate, and there is absolutely no trace of wind and sun. Judging from the relatively backward living standards of the human kingdom of Azeroth, he is definitely not an ordinary robbery bandit. "Oh? Misunderstanding? He. An inexplicable sneer appeared on Zhang Cheng's face. He looked up and down at the other party, and at the same time, he quickly searched for the more famous forces in the game in his mind, and quickly locked on 2 targets. Obviously, there are only 2 organizations active in the Hillsbrad Hills area, one is Syndicate and the other is Ravenholt. The former is an Alterac noble who was exiled because of his betrayal of the Alliance in the Second Alliance and Tribal War. The goal of these guys is to regain their own territory and status. For this purpose, they resort to assassination, deception, stealing and other despicable means. They even occupied Dunhold Castle, as well as a large number of farms and sentry towers. Before the undead natural disaster broke out, their forces expanded to include Silver Pine Forest, Hillsbrad Hills, Alterac Mountains, Arati Highlands, the valley hinterland by Lake Lordomere, etc. Almost all transportation hubs were blocked. Controlled by this evil organization, a huge monopoly network is formed. Perhaps in a decade or so, the ambitious nobles of Outland will really be able to subvert the rule of Lord Aaron by relying on economic means. But unfortunately, fate played a little joke. Just when they thought that their plan was about to succeed, a terrible plague swept the entire northern continent, and Lord Aaron, known as the most powerful kingdom of human beings in Azeroth, was devastated. Occupied by the undead like a tide, only a small part of the south remains. As for the so-called subversive plan, it has also been postponed indefinitely. At least until the threat of the Scourge and the Forsaken is resolved, the leaders of the Syndicate dare not act rashly. The latter is a very mysterious assassin organization that doesn't care about race or faction at all. Whether it is humans, elves, undead, trolls, orcs, as long as their strength is recognized, they are eligible to become a member of them. Few people know their real purpose, only that the organization has been recruiting elite thieves, constantly collecting people from intelligence around the world. In addition, the main spheres of influence of these two organizations are from the Hillsbrad Hills to the Alterac Valley, so there will inevitably be friction and contradictions, and they will become mortal enemies over time. Zhang Cheng thinks that these guys are more likely to be syndicates. After all, Ravenholt will never attack the caravans of the past for money. They are more like mercenaries who collect money and do things, rather than greedy robbers. The man with the delicate mustache took 2 steps back cautiously, with a fake smile on his face, and defended in a very cunning tone, "That's right. Your honorable mage, I assure you that what happened just now all stemmed from a small intelligence error. If I knew in advance that you lived here, I would not have sent someone a gift and greeting, and then waited for permission to act." "Get permission? Ha 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 ha. Do you think I will allow you to attack a caravan under my protection?" Zhang Cheng couldn't help but burst into laughter. He originally thought that he was shameless enough sometimes, but compared with the guy in front of him, he was not even worthy of carrying shoes for him. At least after he failed to attack someone, he would never be able to say the word misunderstanding, because anyone who was not a fool could clearly distinguish between misunderstanding and deliberate attack. Why not? I believe that in this world everything has a price, if only I can afford a price that will satisfy you. Besides, this sly merchant may not have told you that there is a hidden item in his goods. A small box of precious arcane crystals, right? He's trying to get your shelter with only some cheap food, which in my opinion is essentially a deception. Since he deceived you in the first place, then why do you continue to protect him?" Having said that, the man turned around and glanced meaningfully at the old George with bruises on his face. The latter opened his mouth to say something, but before he could make a sound, he immediately found a sharp dagger hidden in the darkness, pressing against Jenny's slender neck, and quickly closed his mouth. Due to the very dim light, Zhang Cheng didn't notice these subtle movements, but he wasn't stupid enough to believe a guy who wanted to kill him a few minutes ago. He just stared at the arcane crystal emitting a charming halo in the box, and asked with a half-smile, "Then tell me, what price do you plan to buy me? What price do you plan to use to redeem your life? What do you think of half a box of arcane crystals? You know that this is the most valuable mineral in Azeroth, and a small piece is worth the income of a farm for a year. And for a powerful mage like you, arcane magic crystals not only mean wealth, but also many other things, such as powerful magic items." The man with the mustache undoubtedly noticed Zhang Cheng's look at the arcane crystal, and immediately offered to exchange conditions. But he didn't know that the reason why Zhang Cheng was so concerned about arcane crystals was not out of greed. He just wanted to see with his own eyes what the mysterious materials used to make top weapons and armors in the game looked like. Reading www.yuyugonshu.com. It has to be said that from a visual point of view, Anyone who sees an arcane crystal for the first time will be attracted by the strong halo it emits. Gold, orange, blue, red, purple, green, silver, white. The arcane crystals in the wooden box are like stars hanging in the night sky. Even if they have no practical use, I believe many people will be crazy about the beautiful appearance of this mineral. At the moment when Zhang Cheng's attention was firmly attracted, a cold light suddenly flashed in the darkness. Immediately after the next second, poof! The dazzling bright red liquid sprayed out a full meter away, and it was scattered everywhere. The man with the delicate mustache looked incredulous, clutching the aorta that was spewing blood, raised his trembling right hand, and pointed at the shadow that was close at hand, as if he wanted to say something. But unfortunately, the blood blocked his throat and trachea, and he could only make a short drinking sound. After struggling desperately for more than 10 seconds, he fell to the ground with a plop, and his two fearful eyes slowly disappeared. Look! The shadow hidden in the darkness, with an assassination technique that ordinary people can't capture, easily cut a series of deadly parts of the neck including the throat, trachea, aorta, etc. It took less than a second from the appearance to the end. Even he was very cruel and deliberately did not choose to let the target die immediately, but let the target feel the pain of being unable to breathe and the fear of a large amount of blood loss before dying. Only the perverts and lunatics who enjoy killing and depriving their lives will choose to use this method. With the dark red blood dripping down the gaps between the wooden boards, the entire forest cabin fell into a dead silence.